Hello, my name is Tazio and welcome to my Highland Park home. The house was probably completed in 1886. It was built by Mary Steele Bigelow, and she was the matriarch of the Bigelow family. She had three children: Edward Manning Bigelow, her daughter Elizabeth McGee, and her son Thomas, I believe his name was. And she built a family compound, basically. Mary Steele's house was at Highland and what is now Wayne Road, and she built three mostly identical homes for her children. So this was Mary Elizabeth's home, and Edward Manning, for whom like Bigelow Boulevard, and he was Andrew Carnegie's sort of city engineer, he lived next door. And the third house we don't think is one of the originals anymore. The one that stands there now seems to be a little bit later vintage. So I am an oil painter. I do that full time, and this is my studio. But this is probably the only ceiling left in the house from that period. The house, in the shifting fortunes of Highland Park, at different points the house was cut up into apartments. And so you can see there's kind of a crack running across here. That's because this room had a partition built into it. And it was actually some sort of efficiency apartment. There was a wall. Miraculously, they did not cut through the crown molding, which would have been, disastrous and irreplaceable. But what they did do was remove the mantle. So we went to Construction Junction one day and were able to locate a mantle which has actually some of the same motifs in it that exist in the ceiling. So we were really happy about that. It pretty much fit. My dad had to do a little bit of work on it. So one of the surprises in this room, and I don't know if this feature is original or whether this may have been put here when the apartment, when this was cut up into an efficiency apartment, but there's a little secret door that leads to the bathroom. So we have lived in this house a little over 13 years, I think. We moved here from Brooklyn, New York, although I am from Eastern Ohio originally. And I remember coming over to this curved corner after looking at the house and being like, I wish you luck, house. I don't think it'll be us, but I love you and I wish you luck. And then it did turn out to be us. So that was a happy story. This is what the previous owner called the coral room. We really weren't sure what to call it. He was super helpful to us and super friendly, and came and answered all our questions over time. So he referred to it as the coral room, and so do we. Perhaps it was a sitting or reception room originally. I don't think the floor plan of this room is completely accurate to its 1886 original floor plan. It seems probably a little more open than I think you might imagine for that period. The woodwork was actually redone in the 20s, perhaps. I have been told that there was a prominent Pittsburgh decorator who lived here in the 1940s, and he had a lot to do with how the house looks now. So the house has a lot of, I don't know if they're original, but a lot of old pocket doors, and they are what is called ensuite woodwork. So if you roll it out on this side, it matches the little rosettes and the woodwork for this room. But if you come around into this room, it matches the woodwork for this room. When we bought the house, it had a sort of a scarlet shag carpeting over the floor. And when we took that up, there were actually still pretty big unfinished spots on the floor where a big substantial pool table had sat. So this room was originally a billiards room. One of the things that really excited me about this house was it had these ingle nooks, and we have meant to reupholster the ingle nooks since the day we moved in. But anyone who lives in an older home knows there's what you want to do, and then there's what you have to do. So this is still kind of on the to-do list. A major thing we did do in this room was that all of the friezes had been painted kind of a Band-Aid color, a tan color. And my mother actually noticed that you could sort of see these swirls under the paint. And she's like, there's something under there. And so she and I started stripping. It was done with more enthusiasm than skill, admittedly. So, restorers, I'm sure, sorry. But We went all the way around, revealed the frieze, and in doing so, we also noticed that the woodwork, which was when we were originally here, it was this almost espresso brown and very dull. And as we were stripping in a couple places, a little bit of stripper got down onto the woodwork, and we're like, wow, that's like beautiful golden oak. So we did a second round and went back around and exposed what the woodwork should really look like. There is another little secret door, which leads to my very, very messy pantry. So we're not going to go in there today, but this would have been where probably, if the men were in here having cigars and playing pool, probably a butler or a person employed in the house would be able to discreetly slip in here, refresh their drinks and things. It's really handy. My cats are obsessed with going through it constantly. So this was really the big story of this house when we were looking. Because I am an artist, I had never seen a room with more elaborate painting, mural painting, and I just was heartbroken at the thought that I couldn't live with it. So it has always been my favorite room, but about 2 years ago, disaster struck. My son was at home upstairs and he heard a thump. He came down and the ceiling had not fully hit the floor because it's overlaid with canvas, but the plaster had failed and it had dropped about 18 inches to the level of the picture rails. And it was everything in front of the fireplace, almost out to the chandelier. You can still kind of see the seams. My husband rushed home. He ran down to Home Depot. He got some scaffolding to sort of hold it in place so it didn't pull more down. The very, very kind people at McClellan Plastering got to us within hours and kind of helped make sure it was stable enough. Then we had to try to decide what we could do. I couldn't bear the thought of losing it entirely. And we miraculously were able to find a master restorer right in our own neighborhood. And he came over and he looked at it and he said, well, it can be saved, but it can't be me, because he was retired from climbing scaffolding. He gave me a lot of helpful advice and then was like, okay, Tazio, it's on you. And so my husband and I, we went up there and carefully, on scaffolding, we carefully took all the crumbled, rotten plaster off the back of the canvas. We had to cut it. There was nothing else we could do. Take it upstairs, store it. Then the plasters came and perfectly restored the cove ceiling. Everything was nice. And then we had to start the process of trying to get it back up, which was it was an awful experience. It was horrible. It was heavy, slippery. It didn't want to stick. And then once it was up, I had to start repainting it. I really will say it's one of my proudest artistic moments. I know it's not perfect. I know all the restorers out there are going to find fault, but I am very proud. I am very proud that we got our ceiling put back up, and it's still with us today. So it does kind of feel like, we were put here in the right place at the right time to be able to sort of be the stewards of this house for now. And, maybe a master restorer will move in someday and they can take it to the next level. This is one of my paintings, actually. My favorite painting of all time is Ophelia by Millet. And of course I could never have that. So I thought, well, maybe I should just make a stab at trying to create my own. So that is my son in a fanciful, he's not dead, he's just floating. And we have a couple other paintings over here that I did. So that was for pandemic 2020. And that one over there, that was an earlier one. This part of the kitchen was probably a butler's pantry originally. We just recently got new countertops and a copper sink, and I love my copper sink so much. This was another Construction Junction find. It kind of came in this color originally, and we had planned to paint it to kind of match, but in the time that it spent here, the color really grew on us. I always say that, I am a reactive, not proactive artist designer. So if there's something original, and unless it really bothers me, I'm always going to try to keep it. Even if it's not original to the house, it was just, I'm sure this color may not have been original to that piece either, but I do like that. I like kind of incorporating something and just trying to work with it rather than needing everything to be my vision. I was not an oil painter by training. I went to art school, but I actually studied fashion. So I took a class at the Pittsburgh Center for the Arts. And I mean, I had painted before, but only as like an elective class. And then I thought, well, I would like to, I'm going to give myself 9 paintings to figure out how to paint a face. And it turned into this series. My son, when he was really young, like so many young boys, was like crazy into guns, even though we're not a gun family. And so I painted one after another after another. So this is one of the guest bedrooms. This furniture is notable mainly because all the pieces are still here. It belonged to my maternal grandmother, and she was very proud of it. When we flipped over one of the drawers, it was actually made by a company in Pittsburgh around 1900, I believe. Still has its original paint. I'm very happy to live with it. This room, again, my mother noticed, actually probably has a muraled ceiling as well. It has been painted over, and I am going to tell you guys, I don't know if I'm going to be the one to dig that mural out. That is hard work. But if anyone ever ends up living in this home, it's under there. This is another guest bedroom. This one still has its original ceiling. It has quite a bit of damage, but at some point I will tackle this ceiling. If you've ever been through the Clayton house, which belongs to the Frick family, this is like a very modest version of the ceiling that is in Helen Frick's bedroom. There are some similarities though. Of course, this one's like fairly crude compared to hers. We're just proud to be the stewards of a home like this and just sort of be here for it and, you know, try to keep it going and hope that like the next person who comes down the line will love it as much as we do. I feel like we're just sort of the people who live here right now, and I hope that the big girl here can keep it going.